Hey, paisans, the time has come. On the air since 2009, the independently produced, non-FCC compliant champ of video game talk podcasting. Here comes Tiger Claw Radio. Here's your host, Critical Failure.
Welcome everybody to Tiger Claw Radio. My goodness, are we in for a treat this week? I put a lot of work into it and I was able to get us, I think, back to where we were before my PC crashed. We have the return of the big box of games. We're going to check those out and see what we can see, which is going to be a good time. We've also got the Zelda Randomizer Challenge, which we're going to go over. And we've got some stuff primarily about Retroarch going crazy and absorbing the gaming world. And to kick things off, we're going to return to the top 40 8-bit collective tracks. That's right. This is what we were doing prior to the crash, counting down the top 40 selected tracks out of, 8,000, something like that? An absurd amount of tracks from the 8-bit collective archive before it went down something like 13 years ago or something like that, however long ago it was. And I went back to the previous episode, and I think it was track... Hold on a second, let me bring it up here. Was it 20 or something? We made it either halfway through or almost halfway through. Top 40, air list. Okay, 21 is the next one. So we're after this week, we'll be halfway through. And the 21st track with no listed artist is Go Ace Man, Go! And then in parentheses, it says song.mp3. So, let's give it a shot. You're listening to Tiger Claw Radio. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about is some advancements in Retroarch that I noticed over the past week. These didn't come out the past week, but I don't keep up with Retroarch news, so I just randomly searched, well, let's see what different cores are available for Retroarch. And I found more than there used to be, and I think it's worth discussing. Okay, so the last time I looked at cores, the only fantasy console or fantasy computer that was available was TIC-80, TIC-80. The TIC-80 computer has a handful of games. It's pretty cool that they added it to Retroarch, because that means the people who make the TIC80 games, you can play them on Steam, you can play them on your phone, you can play them on all of the portable handheld devices that run Retroarch, because that's what they all run now, for the most part. I noticed that there are now two, not one, but two different core choices for Pico 8, which is huge, because Pico 8 is far and away the most developed for a fantasy computer/console there is. Pico 8 has thousands of games for it. So having that available on a handheld, we've had it. Hemrock and I have been able to access Pico 8 on the V90 for quite a bit, because Pico 8 had a halfway decent emulator for OpenDingix, but now that it's on Retroarch, as well as having like just a straight up Android player, now you can play Pico 8 on everything. If it's got a screen, then it can play Pico 8 somehow. So suddenly, the concept of developing a game for Pico 8 is much more worthwhile. I developed a little, solo role-playing tool, to help generate characters for Dungeons and Dragons and dungeons and stuff like that. But it's not really a video game. It just rolls some dice and gives you some random generation. And I developed that for Pico 8 a while back. And now that everything runs Pico 8, it makes more sense for me to finish that and release it so that everyone can use it, because you wouldn't want to use it on a super expensive handheld, but my personal copy, I have brought that up on my V90 a couple of times and used it there and put that next to a notebook and did my role playing that way. That's just a simple little example of some stuff. I mean, that's a nice introduction to programming. I can't think of a more simple app to make than something that just rolls dice and that's it. But that's one thing. There was also, hang on, let me get my notes here. WASM 4, WASM-4, which is a similar sort of thing to Pico 8, except it when you create cartridges, it transfers the cartridges into machine code. So because of that, you can program your apps in several different languages. You're not stuck with Lua like you are in Pico 8. If you want to make a Pico 8 game, it's Lua. If you want to make a TIC80 game, it's Lua. And if you want to make, what's another one? If you want to make a Basic 8 game, you're using Basic. But WASM 4, if you want to make a WASM 4 game, you can use any one of those, which is pretty cool. So I don't think I would be developing games for it, but that door being open, I think, leaves the possibility for more other folks to develop, which leaves the possibility for more things you can do with your emulation handheld that are not piracy, which is ultimately why I think all of this is so important. And I think there was one more. Hang on. I don't think this is new. I think I may have seen this before, but also Easy RPG has a RetroArch core. Since when? Easy RPG is the thing that plays RPG Maker 2000 and 2003 games. So this is what occurred to me. The version of RPG Maker that's available right now, the most recent version that's mega expensive, the reason why that version appeals to me is because you can export into Android really easily, right? So you can make a phone game that runs, good and looks good. That's the part that appeals to me, because it is more portable, right? So if you can make a phone game, you can make an APK that you could play on an Android box, and now you're making a console game. The portability appeals to me. But these the oldest RPG makers available are now the most portable you can get because you can, if you make a cheesy RPG Maker 2000 game, well, guess what? Now you can play that on a phone anyway, because Android has its own Easy RPG that Hemrock talked about last week. Now you can play it on an Android box for the same reason. Now you can play it on any emulation handheld out there, because OpenDingix has an Easy RPG, and now Retroarch has an Easy RPG. anything with a screen that runs stuff can play RPG Maker 2000 games. And I think that is bananas. Absolutely donkey show ridiculous. But in a good way. So it really makes me wish that it makes me want to develop more RPG Maker 2000 and 2003 stuff. Because ultimately that's why I moved on to other things. Because I felt if I made an RPG Maker 2000 game or whatever, who would play it? There'd be very few people out there who'd play it. So it was difficult to stay on fire for that kind of thing. Now that's not the case anymore. My goodness. So yeah, just a little thing to bear in mind. I mentioned in the past that I was working with a group to make a chain game for RPG Maker 2000. At one point, they sent me a link. I don't have it anymore, but they were like, hey, here's a link to one of our older chain games. And it wasn't a download link. It was a link to a browser that ran Easy RPG right in the browser. So I didn't have to download it or install it, anything. It was just a direct URL link right to fire the game up, which was also, pretty crazy. A little bit more believable than running it on the handhelds and whatnot. But yeah, it's a cool thing. So if you've ever had an interest in RPG Maker, just get the old ones. I think Fanatical has them this week, for super cheap, $2 and $2.50 respectively. So that's another, reason to root for old RPG Maker projects. So I think RetroArch is becoming a monster, right? So the things I just listed, RPG Maker, Wasm 4, Pico 8, you might not have any interest in games on those three platforms. But here's why it's a big deal. Because now we've got this program that can be run on anything, Linux, Windows, Android, whatever. And this program is swelling. It's getting bigger. And it's enveloping like all of video games. So it's making, with each core that comes out for this, it makes video games more ubiquitous and more available on more systems. I think the development for RetroArch is extraordinarily important. There's certain systems where it's like, okay, what's a good example? Like another fantasy console that's not really used as much. There's a few that have like a few passionate developers and like a handful of games. Those consoles, I wish I could be like, bro, here's $200. Can you make a RetroArch core for this fantasy console for $200? Just because I want these developers, I want their work to be folded in to the rest of the world, right? There are several platforms like that people make games for, and they're isolated to their little user group. Because if you want to play Linko 12 or whatever it is, one of the things that's like Pico 8 but not quite, if you want to play a Linko 12 game, you've got to go download Linko 12, and you've got to go find the other Linko 12 users and see what's available. And then some of those consoles have things built in to help you with that, but you have to join their subdivision, their subculture, in order to see what people are doing. But integrating them into RetroArch eliminates that, and I think that is beyond incredible. So that's my little rant about RetroArch. I'm absolutely in love with the work they're doing right now. So sorry, games industry. Also, I don't really have time to talk about it now because this week is already running long. But I have in my notes that the Dolphin emulator, is hitting Steam. And I looked this up, and it's not available yet, but it does have... It has a Steam listing, and it's listed for free. So before you know it, we're going to have the Dolphin emulator, which I think is GameCube, right? Just there on Steam. So not quite as ubiquitous as RetroArch, but yeah. So this here again. Sorry, games industry. I don't know. So we'll see what we can see. Certain ROMs are so popular, certain old school games are so popular and have been hacked so many times, there are programs that will develop a random version of that game. And the version, or the example that comes to mind immediately, is The Legend of Zelda. Right? The Legend of Zelda has a very detailed randomizer that you can produce a customized experience. The overworld is random, the stages are all random, everything's random. So I had this idea. I'm going to go ahead and use this and make a random version, a new version of The Legend of Zelda. Very low effort on my part. I just got the randomizer and away we go. And I figured, rather than just doing the randomizer, which is what it's for, I would put that version up on for distribution, and we can all play it together and compare notes. Zelda is an exploration game, so let's explore and see what we can find and what we can't find. One of the cool things about the Zelda randomizer is that it made documentation for everything in the game. So it comes with 3 levels of documentation. That's, hey, here's a map you can look at, and then there's the mid-tier level with more details, and then there's the top-tier level of documentation that contains all spoilers. So stay away from that top-tier level if you want to play and enjoy the game, but at least it's there, so nothing will be lost in time forever. We'll be able to solve all the riddles, and whatnot. So I've already posted that on Discord, so you can give it a try. And that's another thing that I've been playing. I've been playing the Zelda randomizer on my Powkitty V90, and I gotta say, it was really fun. It had some balance issues, but I didn't know what to think at first, because a lot of the more difficult monsters were closer to the beginning, and I was like, oh, this is going to suck. But then to balance it out, there is a shop that's not too far from the, just somewhere in the world map that you can find, that has the blue ring for sale. And when I saw that, I was like, well, you got to get a bunch of hearts before it'll let you get the blue ring, right? No, you can buy it as soon as you have the cash, and that sort of balanced out the monsters being too powerful. Another thing that made it easier to play is the blue candle, which I bought. I found that in my playthrough, and if you don't remember, there's 2 candles in the original Legend of Zelda, a blue one and a red one, and the difference is that the blue candle, you can only throw the flame out once, and then you have to leave and go to the next screen, and then the red one, you can do it over and over again. So the blue candle made it very difficult to look for secrets, because you would have to leave the screen and come back. So to fix that, in this game, when I bought the blue candle, it just has the ability to burn over and over and over again, just like the red candle did. So it's a little bit easier to look for secrets than it was early game in the authentic Legend of Zelda. I'm having a great time with it. I have only found level 2 and level 4. And weirdly enough, I found the power bracelet loose on the world map. Although, I'm thinking about it now, that might have been... Was that how it was in the original game? No, there's no way. I don't know. It's been a weird game, and I've really been enjoying it very much. So, if you have a low-end handheld device, go grab yourself a copy of this Zelda Randomizer ROM and play it. Give it a shot. I intend to adjust it to make it so that the patch is available, so you can get it and play it without having to acquire the ROM. Because right now the ROM itself, the patched ROM, is available. That's not going to fly long term. But I will run it through the thing so that it's the patch, and then you patch it against your own ROM, and then you can play. Because I know a couple of people listening don't go out and get publicly available ROMs, but I will fix that so that you can play too. But yeah, Zelda Randomizer. It's a great spin on the let's all play a game for the month. So I don't know, give it a try, and let me know what you think after wandering around a bit in Zelda Randomizer. Stick with it though, because I've hit 25 deaths. And I haven't got a piece of the Triforce yet. And after a few sessions, I started to carve out a path, and it got easier. So I don't know. So there's another thing for you to enjoy some video games with. All right, boys and girls, we are just about at the 20-minute mark. This is the part where I like to remind everybody it's a Patreon-sponsored program. As an old tradition here on the air, I like to read off the names of the contributors sort of as a hall of distinguished gentlemen. Since they're keeping TCR coming back week after week, year after year, I tip my hat to them. So they are Hemrock, EmeraldRangers.com, Tecmo Balls, as well as Darabka. Thank you, gentlemen, for your contributions, and I hope you're enjoying the party. Okay, so at this point, before we move forward, I received an introduction from Hemrock. Now, last week we talked about him doing a Final Fantasy list, and he sent me his explanation. So let's go there now.
Let's talk a little bit about this Final Fantasy ranking hootenanny. So, played the first 8 games, and now I want to put together a top 8 because that's the weird nerd I am. And before I dive into that, I need to go over some caveats, some ground rules, if you will. So, like any list, caveat number 1, this is a subjective ranking. It's likely different from yours. Some of these, well, I suppose all of these have some type of sentimental value, whether positive, negative, significant, less significant. And that's going to affect the way I rank it. That's just the bottom line. This is not a completely objective ranking. Caveat number 2. All the Final Fantasy games are great games. Hey, listen to me. They're all great. They're great games, at least given their historical context. So even the worst game on this list, it's still a good game. Don't get your pants in a wad if your favorite Final Fantasy game happens to be the one at the bottom of the list. Sorry, don't take it personal. I don't necessarily even hate the game at the bottom of the list, but I have to rank it, so someone's got to be at the bottom. Caveat number 3. I enjoy battling/leveling mechanics over story. So if a game emphasizes or has really deep battle mechanics, regardless of the story, that game is going to be ranked higher. Take that into account. Other people are the exact opposite. But that's a big player in how I position these games on the list. And caveat number 4 is I know that these games were released on multiple platforms. I get it. And I understand that playing the game on different platforms may be a different experience. So, what I will do to try to give you guys a perspective of where I'm coming from is I will tell you the system that I beat it upon. Caveat number 5 is I will be using the Japanese numbering system. So I know that Final Fantasy II in North America was really Final Fantasy IV. Well, I'm largely going to stick with calling it Final Fantasy IV. Same with 3, which is now 6. We never got 5. That whole spiel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, do yourself a favor and DuckDuckGo Final Fantasy release order. All right. Lastly, this is caveat number 6. There may be spoilers. For the most part, I don't emphasize spoilers, but it's hard for me to talk about some of these games without at least giving away some of the plot. So there may be spoilers.
Point well taken. Thanks very much for checking in, man. I love the prospect of hearing about Final Fantasy from somebody who's a much more seasoned Final Fantasy player. So this is a series that I hope we can get up off the ground, and I realize that this is going to take some effort on your part. So whatever I can do to make it easy or help you along, just say the word, man. Much appreciated. Okay, so let's talk about the box of games from Tigerfest, and I don't know what to call this yet. This is the modern day version of On the Desk, but to fill you in, we had Tigerfest, which was a tiny little private gathering between myself and Sendu and Hemrock, and we went game hunting in Maryland and in Virginia, and I acquired a box of 28 games. So I've been going through them on the air. I did this prior to, my PC melting down, and I was we're going to go through one each week, and that way that will drive me to play them all. And I did it once. The first week I played Kessen, and that was the end of it. So this past week, in order to get back into the groove, I played a game that would be a little bit easier to get into, and that was Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec for the PS2. I bought that game for $2 at the used bookstore in Maryland, which is funny because we had done this big tour and we had driven all over the place, and the place I bought the most was this little used bookstore, like in one neighborhood over from where I live, that I go to all the time. But anyway, the actual game. So to give you some context, it's a game that I had a long time ago. Actually, to be more accurate, my older brother had it, and that's how I was able to play it. I never actually owned it myself, but I still have my save data from when my older brother had it, and it's marked from 2002. So 20-year-old save data. I can't remember if it was 2002 or 2003, but I know that as I checked at some of the records, and there were records marked 2002. So some of the driving records are 20 years old. So that was kind of cool. So I started a new save because I figured that was too long ago for me to really remember what was up. And one thing that sticks out to me immediately was that I loved the way it felt to drive the cars. If you go back, early 3D rendered, fully 3D rendered games on the PS1, the vast majority of them, or a lot of them, had input lag just because that was what the hardware did at the time, and it wasn't such a big deal. You know, if you played Twisted Metal 2 back when it was a new game, yes, it had input lag, but your brain just adapted, and that's something that you can do with input lag if you're willing to put in the time. But now, especially since I've been into computers, if you're experiencing input lag, it's usually because your hardware is not strong enough to run whatever the thing is, or maybe there's an issue with your monitor. Whenever you see input lag today, it's a red flag to go check out what's causing the problem. And because of that, it makes it very hard for me to go back and play some of those old games. Case in point, portable hardware, portable emulation devices. There's a good number of them that can play PS1 games very, very well. And one of the games that I tried multiple times was Gran Turismo 1 and Gran Turismo 2. Both excellent games, all right? I'm not about to dump on Gran Turismo 1 and 2, but they were a product of their time, and they had input lag just a little bit. And you talk about Gran Turismo, this is a game where it's high difficulty racing simulation. So, it's not at all the arcade racing game, even though it had the arcade mode. Yay! No. When I was playing GT3 A-Spec this past week, all right, I started at the bottom. I bought my car, which was some kind of hatchback, coupe thing for $18K. And then I started with the Sunday Cup, which is the first set of races that you can do without a license. We're going to talk about the licensing system in a minute. And I could tell that my car was not as fast as the other cars on the road. Never mind driving ability. So I was like, I was running qualifiers and stuff, which is something I would never do in like an arcade racing game. The only other games I can think of that had the ability to run qualifiers, would be like the F1 series on PC, or maybe like Project Racing, or like some of those more hardcore games. I don't remember anything from the PS2 era having that. Now, of course, I'm sure there were games, but you didn't have to do it in Super Sprint on the NES. You didn't have to do it in Ridge Racer, at least I don't think. I didn't have to do it in Rage Racer, which was a racing game I played the most of in the PS1 days. But yeah, okay, so back to the point I was making. It was wonderful to play a game where you could drive these cars without input lag. Yes, it was beautiful because it was a big step up from the PS1 graphics, but it was the controls that stuck out to me the most, not necessarily the visuals. So the bit that I played this past week, again, was the first series of 3 races. And I ran those races probably like 3 to 4 times each, which, took a couple hours or whatever. And they don't require you to get a license, but licensing is a thing that's been with the Gran Turismo series since the beginning. And in this particular game, it's pretty brutal. Like, you're not going to get it on the, if there's 5 or 6, I can't remember how many it is, tests for your Class B license, you're not going to get that Class B license from 5 or 6 heats. Each one of those tests you're going to have to do several times, figure out how to do what it's teaching you, and then and really put some practice in. And I mean, if you think about it, it's a nice concept, because a lot of what I know about racing came from running those licensing tests years and years ago. They talk about running the racing line, the proper racing line when maintaining a curve and stuff like that. You can learn a lot from them, but man, are they a pain. So, and they definitely lock off content later in the game if you can't pass them. Like I haven't acquired any of the licenses yet. I don't know how many of the cups I can do without one. Like I know the Sunday Cup doesn't require it, and I think the Clubman Cup after it doesn't. But that's a total of 6 races. And then if I can't get my license, I guess I'm stuck in arcade mode. Beautiful game. It simulates very well. It's very hard for me to compare it to Gran Turismo 4 because yes, I have that game, but I haven't played that in almost as long. That one's probably been 10 years since I played it. So the only real thing I can remember between the two is that I think there were more tests in GT4, and there were less endurance races, which is a thing. And the GT3 had endurance races, but again, I could never get to them. So I saw them in the menu. I was like, oh, look at that. Here's a 2-hour race. That sounds crazy. That's awesome. What other game has that? But it was locked behind that license gate, so I could never really do it. I can't imagine a better buy for $2. Like, if I'm going to sit down and play a racing game, I personally would rather find, the PC nowadays is like the racer's paradise. There's no real way a console can compete. But for a PS2 racing game, picking up GT3 for $2 was a dream. And I don't know if I'm going to go back to the simulation mode, to be perfectly honest, right now. But what I might do is open the arcade mode and play that split screen with my kids, especially my youngest. He loves cars. He loves racing. So that's my experience with Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. I want to dig out GT4 and play it immediately afterwards to see how they compare. But I'm going to be perfectly honest. I got enough other stuff on my plate that I don't see that happening. What I do see happening is moving on to the next game in the box, because the box is full of games. That was GT3. That was the second game we've done. The third game, the next one we're going to do, next week we're going to talk about Romance of the Three Kingdoms 7 for the PS2. And this one in particular, I wanted to put early in the list because I saw Hemrock looking at it when we were at one of the shops. He was looking at it, and then I was like, hey, are you going to buy that? And he was like, no, I'm good. And then I was like, yes, then I'll take it. And then while we were getting close to checking out, he was like, yeah, let me know how that is, because I'm kind of interested. So I kind of feel like I bought it out from under him. So, sorry. So we're going to play Romance of the Three Kingdoms 7 this coming week, and I'll let you know how it goes. I'm interested to play it because I like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it would be... I was going to say it would be the most modern one I've played in English, but I have one on Steam, so I don't know if that's true. Anyway, we'll give it a shot, and I'll let you know how it goes. One game I've been playing this past week that nobody gives any props to is Dead Island. Dead Island is a game I played all the way through on the Xbox 360 years and years ago. It was in my college days when I could still stay up late. I remember playing with my buddy Blake. We played through the entire game, and we had fun playing it, but by the end, when it was over, Blake was like, nah, man, that game wasn't great. And I look around at media, surrounding public opinion surrounding the game, and most people talk bad about it, but I think it's awesome, and I just loaded it up again on a lark early in the week, and I gotta say, I got sucked in. I was only expecting to play for a few minutes, but I've put in the last week like 5 hours into this game, to the point where I missed out on a few things I was supposed to get done around the house. So yeah, if you've never played Dead Island, good game. What is the game that came out afterwards that people compare it to? Hang on, let me look this up. It's worth looking up. Yeah, here we go. So this is off of one of the reviews from Steam. Somebody says Looking back, many will say this is just Dying Light without the parkour. And yeah, I never played Dying Light, but I've seen some footage of it. It looks similar, and I think I even have it on Epic because it was free for a while. So I kind of want to play Dying Light now. Dead Island had a sequel, Dead Island Riptide, which from what I understand was just more of the same game, and there was a Dead Island 2 that there's a trailer for that ultimately got canceled. And it's a shame because I think that's a really cool game, apart from some really weird choices. And the first section out of 3 is far and away the best bit. So yeah, and also we're looking at a release date, at least on the definitive edition, of 2016. So old game by today's standards, and yeah, still good times. When I was playing it, there were a couple of instances where it was like such and such a player is near you. Press X to join their game or something. So apparently, online multiplayer still working, servers still working, which I'm shocked at a game this age that isn't like uber popular would still be playable in that sense. But apparently it is, which is great. So Dead Island, good times are had by all. I still have a copy of Dead Island for PS3 that's unopened that I got from NG. He was like, I bought this, I don't know why, and he gave it to me without ever playing it. And the only reason I never opened it is because I had it on Xbox 360 and also on PC, so there was never a need. But I think next year at Tigerfest I might bring that along in the retro junk box, because we're talking about a game that's pushing 10 years old. I think it could find its home in the junk box. This week over on the Discord server, I did a lot more work on the files repository. It's just something I've been into over the past week. So I don't talk about my job a whole lot. Partially because I don't want to get doxxed, but partially because I signed an NDA, and I actually take that seriously. But one thing I can say is when I first got the job, there was a programming lead, the dev lead, who has been gone from the company for a long time. But while he was still here, at one point he was like, "Hey, I have this folder, and it's full of portable installs of programs that I like to use. So if you need to pull anything, just help yourself." And I kept that folder with his handful of portable install freeware programs for years after he left the company. I was still referring back to this folder, and the programs it had in it were stuff you could just pull from any given website. AutoHotkey was one of them. There were Notepad++. That's how I got introduced to Notepad++. Also, there were a couple of replacements for MS Paint that functioned the same way, just have more ability and functionality. And it occurred to me that this little batch of programs was like his legacy, at least as far as I was concerned as the dev lead. I know in development it's a ridiculous thing to say because his legacy was the work he did on the program we produced, but we eventually migrated programs, so all that's gone, and his little repository of applications that he used remains. So I started building my own little repository of applications. That's one reason why I did it. And it's over on Discord, and I've been putting up things that I know my group has no interest in. Nobody within our group is going to use Trizbort to locally map out a text adventure, but I love it that it's here, and I no longer have to cruise all the pages to get it. Now, as I've mentioned before, Discord has a limitation where it will only allow you to upload a file that is 8 megabytes or less. And at first that was like, there's a lot of really good little freeware programs that are like 10, 20 megabytes. 20 is usually the norm. So it limited what I could put on here. But the more I used it, the more it became like a challenge. Now I'm looking for all of the cool Windows programs that weigh in at less than 8 megabytes. So I put in a bunch of new things there recently. Some is just like standard stuff that you're familiar with, and then like I have a couple of rarities in on my storage devices that I wanted to make sure I got saved. One is a game, and forgive my language here. That's the name of the game. It's called Wartwat, and I actually made a video about this in like 2011 or something. And that game had disappeared for years, but has since returned as a special feature. They changed the name to War Daddy or whatever. So I have the original build that I used for YouTube however long ago. It says my video is 13 years old. Okay. That game is now, I just dropped it in the Discord so you can pick that up because it's only 5.8 megs. And then Not Tetris is another little classic. It just looks like the Game Boy Tetris, but it's a physics tool, and the pieces just bounce around and flip all over the place. That's less than 4 megabytes, so that's up there. EnviroBear 2000, an absolute classic. It's like the early troll game back when there was not like nearly as much troll stuff that you could download and play now. And I especially like this game because it feels like a Flash game, and Flash has been retired. So it's like a leftover from a bygone era. It's like one of the few gems of its kind that you can still play from, back in those days. That's there. And then another one is 30 Flights of Loathing, which is a little typing game. Somebody was making fun of the Humble Indie Bundle, and they made the Mumble Indie Bungle. And there's an article about it that you can still read over on Kotaku. They were talking about like wanting something, and then somebody buys you an indie bundle, and you get your indie bundle and open it up, and it's not quite what you wanted. That's what they were making. They made like a bunch of almost games. And most of them were not games in that sense, but rather troll programs. And 30 Flights of Loathing is the only one that was an actual game. It's a type-along program where you have to type the words it tells you so the little man can climb up the stairs. And if you make a mistake, he falls down to the bottom. And if you succeed, he gets all the way to the top where he jumps down to the bottom in his depression. It's a crazy tiny little program at 1.6 megs. And it stuck with me because I always put it in whenever I would play Anarchy Arcade. You guys remember Anarchy Arcade? It's a little Source Engine game where you could build arcade cabinets, and then you would have the arcade cabinets linked to programs on your computer so that you could like launch games from this little 3D arcade. So 30 Flights of Loathing got a lot of play in my Anarchy Arcade days. And then today I just uploaded Winboard, which is the de facto local chess, in my opinion. That has yet to be, at least as far as free programs are concerned, it has yet to be eclipsed as the dominant local chess program for free. And I think the only exception would be there might be better if you dug back into like MS-DOS and stuff like that. But this one is maintained, and it has a lot of modern feeling features and stuff like that, and it's only 2.47 megs, so that's a lot of fun. I've been having a lot of fun with this, and one of the things that makes me like fired up to do this more is the concept of utilizing very old machines, right? Because if you like were to buy a desktop computer from the thrift store, which I have done, it's a lot of fun, but it also comes with severe limitations. This repository are programs that would work in that environment. As long as you can get Discord running, or at least get Discord running on like a neighboring computer and then port them over via USB or whatever, you could play Mario Paint Composer on your old PC. You could play RO9 until the cows come home. Yeah, ZZT, if you can get MS-DOS box up and running. All of these are great things to do on old, outdated hardware. And I think it fits in with something that Hemrock and I were working on, the concept of making an MS-DOS, or not DOS, but making a floppy disk magazine, which is something I still want to do at some point. So yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. So I'll tell you what. If you know of a really tiny program that you can get for free, I would love to know what it is, so we can expand upon our little repository. Sometimes I think about developing like a game. I've got all sorts of projects running, but I'll take Local Mud, for example, the text adventure that I've been working on. When that's in a completed state, I want to release a physical version of that. Sound ridiculous? It is. Here's the deal. People who are into audio and cassettes and stuff, like vintage audio, anyone who has any like interest in or ability to utilize cassettes has at some point released their own cassette, right? Mixtapes. Here's my ambient noise project that I made 10 copies of, something like that. So I went on Amazon probably about 3 or 4 months ago, or maybe more, and I bought a little package of USB thumb drives, 5 of them for a few dollars or whatever it was, and I have a bunch of little containers. I thought I would make something that looks like a mixtape, but you open it up and there's the USB thumb drive, and that's something I could use to make like commemorative editions of Local Mud or whatever game it is that I finish. And then, because my game would be tiny, and because it's a USB thumb drive, I'd have to utilize the rest of the space some way. So, hey, along with that game, since the game is released for free and I would only be selling it for the cost of materials, here's a complete copy of the of the hashtag files repository, or something like that. And that's something I've always not always, but maybe the past year or so, I've had it in my mind, making something that looks like a mixtape with a custom mixtape cover. And you open up the little jewel case, and there's the USB in there, and that's how the game is sold. You see something similar in the emulation world. Excuse me, not the emulation world. In the like custom case world, like the collecting world, opposite of emulation world. For Game Boy, there was a site that was running a project for a while of making cassette tape covers for Game Boy games. The idea being, if you had an old cassette tape case, you could take some pliers and rip out the 2 pegs, and it would perfectly fit an old Game Boy cartridge. And then you could put in, print one of these custom cases for Pokemon Blue or whatever, and stick it in there, and bada boom, bada bing, you've got a really nice looking box for whatever your old favorite Game Boy game is. I don't know what became of that project. I don't think it really caught on because it's not something I see people using, in common usage when people are showing off their collections and whatnot. But I always thought it was a cool thing, and I thought it was a neat idea for software. I'd like to see more people, when it comes to software, use some of those guerrilla distribution techniques that you see in underground music, right? In underground music, people will make mixtapes, they'll make CDRs and just leave them places and stuff. It's kind of hard to do that with software because there's no way a mixtape can really mess up your tape player, unless it's the cassette tape has gum on it or something. I don't know. But with software, it becomes harder because of viruses, and software can be malicious in a way that vintage music cannot. But I don't think that's a reason to abandon the idea, If you're getting software from a trusted developer, somebody who isn't out to get you, somebody who's just trying to create art, I think we can totally do it. That's the reason why Hemrock and I think are into this diskette library or diskette magazine thing. Which, by the way, Hemrock, it occurs to me, it's April now, so we've got 7 or 8 months before the new year. This is the time we should start getting the disc together for next year. If we want to have a disc for Tigerfest 2, like I tried to do for Tigerfest 1, but let it go, this is when we need to start doing it. That way we can get it together little by little. I've still got all my discs from last year that never got used. I still got my labels. We could do this. Now's the time. So, yeah, let's talk on that privately. but because it's a lot to lay on top of what else is going on with Tiger Claw Radio right now. With the box of games that I've been playing from last year, and with recovering from the loss of the old computer, which I think we bounced back from that pretty well. So it's a thought. It's a little bit of rambling of like guerrilla software distribution and development. I think is a super interesting idea, because the more you do that, the more you go underground with your distribution, the more you go underground with your development, the more you take away from big platforms, the more freedom you have. And I think that is ultra important, right? So just some food for thought. Okay, so I'm not going to use the Batman transition sound effect again, because I've had to use it a bunch of times, but after that last bit was recorded about the files repository, that very day, that same day, there was an announcement on Discord that the maximum file size had changed from 8 megabytes to 25 megabytes, which it more than doubled. So it opened up what I can do with the file repository in a big way. The very first thing that came to mind was Angband. We can maintain Angband releases. I think Angband weighs in at like 22, 23 megabytes, which I gotta say, kind of stoked about. So a little egg on my face after talking about the 8 megabyte limitation for so long, and now it's not an issue, but that's okay. I'm just happy that they changed it. Well, boys and girls, here we are at 51 minutes into the podcast, when I'm usually wrapping things up. But let's jump over to the fail bag. All right. Now, for the fail bag, I first want to take a quick stop over at Emerald Rangers and, see what kind of new stuff they've had going on at their website in the last week. We've got Green Phoenix, Dungeons & Dragons, Honor Among Thieves review. We've got Balin, Wonderworld physical copies reportedly discontinued. And then we've got my podcast, which was the Tetris movie last week. We don't have any comments there, but that is a good place to do it. So let's jump over to Discord, another place where the comments are left. And in the Failbag channel, I believe we had a lot of activity this past week, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, here we go. Hemrock, thanks for another episode, and thanks for reading my comments. Nice tune off the Advent album from Battle of the Bits. The Tetris movie sounded pretty sweet, and I just watched the trailer, which supports my suspicions. Unfortunately, I don't have Apple TV. I do have extensive notes on my top 8 of the first 8 of Final Fantasy games, which are all games from the 1980s and 90s. I sent you an intro to the series that I recorded on my way to ATG back in February. Be forewarned, the audio is a bit rubbish. That's what we played earlier in the show. I just went ahead and played it because I thought it was perfect. It was short, so I think the car audio is much more forgivable. But anyway, let's get back to the comment. Originally, I was going to include the entire countdown as part of my ATG Mega Vancast. However, the microphone that I purchased specifically for that trip let me down. I subsequently sidelined the project. I would still need to record a majority of the entries. Outside the intro, I think I only have 8 and 7 recorded, but they both need editing. I haven't completely given up on the idea. I'll keep you posted. Yeah, I'm pumped about the Retroid Pocket Flip. Supposedly they have started mailing the pre-orders, but I have yet to receive confirmation that my unit has shipped. I think they are sending them out in batches. Hopefully we'll have it sometime in May. How was Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec? It was good. How was it going back to your old save file? It was weird. I was kind of afraid to touch anything because I kind of want it to stay the way it is. So I think I might copy the old save file and then work off of a copy. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't decided. I was on the fence about starting a new save or continuing off my old save. So, yeah, I don't know. It was really neat. Looking for a new sound effect for time passing? How about this gem? And he plays the Batman sound. Batman transition sound effect, which I have been using, so big thanks to that. Maybe you can record a vocal imitation in your classic CF crazy voice. I would like to give that a try. I don't have it in me right now, but that is a fun idea. He goes on, let's see that Wizardry 5 Let's Play. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4 exclamation marks on this sentence, so you know I got to make that happen. 4 exclamation marks is in the territory of serious business every time. After fees and shipping, I made a little less than $130 selling my X18S. Good. A quick pause. Good for you, man. Then you absolutely did the right thing, because you would not have made that much if you sold it to me. But let's get back. He says, I performed the Nintendo DS D-pad mod as well and purchased custom firmware. So I think I like to think it was worth more than a typical used X18S. I didn't know you were interested in buying it. To be honest, it's probably better to save your money and buy something else. Yeah, I would agree. How's the potential new PC project going? Did you sell your GPU? The new PC project, there's not much I can do right now because I'm just trying to gather funds together. You know, it's you know, there's not much I can do until I have more money. I feel like if I started getting deep into it now, then I would get trigger happy and I'd buy something before I was ready and end up with less power than I could have. So, long story short, we'll see as it gets close to November, because my goal right now is to pull the trigger on something new right around Black Friday this year. That gives me plenty of time to save, plenty of grass to mow, plenty of parts to sell, so on and so forth. As far as selling the old graphics card, I honestly want to test it and make sure it still functions, because I need to make sure it didn't get burned out, since I had to stop using that computer because it wasn't displaying anything, right? You know, don't know. Assuming it works, you know, I'll sell it, whatever. To your point, that's $20. $20 is $20. Congrats on your increase in subs. Celebrate like it's 2009. Yeah, I kind of did. It was the first time I looked at that sub count and I was like, oh, this is making me feel good. He says batteries for the V90 were mentioned. Yes, you can easily find batteries on Amazon. It takes BL5C batteries, the old Nokia cell phone type, but be aware that there are tricksters out there that will claim the capacity of the battery is higher than it really is. So be suspicious of anyone who states the battery is larger than 12 milliamp hours. And especially if the ad says over 1600 milliamp hours. The standard battery is 1020 milliamp hours for reference. Keep rolling retro, Hemrock. I asked him also about the dual boot thing, because I figured, let's do the dual boot. Let's do it. You know, I haven't messed with Linux in a long time, and I learned a lot. When I was messing with Linux before. So, you know, give it a shot. Especially since I'm talking about getting a new computer. That means, best case scenario, this machine's days are numbered. Let's dual boot. It's a perfect time to do it. Hard drive space isn't an issue because I'm running a 5 terabyte external hard drive, and that's where all my data is going. It's not going on this thing. To make the transition easier. Yeah, so I asked him what should I boot into, and he says, I'd recommend Zorin OS. It was designed as a Windows replacement, so much so that it features an application allowing users to run many Windows programs. Just click on the Windows install file, and Zorin will walk you through it. Additionally, they have added another layer of compatibility to LibreOffice to ensure documents created in Libre do not have issues when opened in Microsoft Office. I recommend getting the core version. Overall, Zorin is much more fun with less hassle. Zorin OS. Make your computer better. And I mentioned this in text, but I knew a guy at work who said he was on the development staff for Zorin, and I was like in awe at that. I was like, wow, you're like listed as a contributing developer. Filling out change requests and giving patches and stuff. I thought that was awesome. And then eventually I asked him, how did you get on the contributor list? And he was like, oh, I'm just paying a fee. I was like, oh, well, you're not programming anything. Some hero of technology you are. But that's okay. He's contributing in his own way. Yeah, so, I will check Zorin out. And that is the extent of what we have over on the Discord server. Let's check out YouTube and see what we've got going on there. Okay. Let's see what's going on YouTube. I swear, every time I switch over to YouTube, there's always a gap where I get distracted. This is no exception. Excuse me. 6 days ago. Now, you might remember if you've been following the YouTube channel that I posted a little video showing off the handheld collection. Kaiser Kate says, really enjoyed this video. Starting to dive into the Emu machine scene, which means something very different when you're talking to an Australian, by the way. But anyway, back to the comment. I've only got 2 machines in my collection so far. I've got the Retroid Pocket 3, decent machine for up to Dreamcast, PSP, and PS2. Can work, but it needs either a standalone emulator for a lot of settings and tweaking. I'm too lazy for that. I just use RetroArch on it for gaming. I also watch videos on it while I'm in bed. Side note, the day I ordered the Retroid Pocket 3 was annoying. Why? Well, because it's the Retro Pocket 3 Plus because the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus got announced 10 minutes after I made the order. Oh, jeez, I'm sorry, man. My other machine is an Xbox One Series S. Paid the doorman fee to Minecraft, got a dev account. Now it's a gaming beast. No, it didn't turn into Drabka. RetroArch is loaded on it, and it runs everything up to Nintendo Wii and plays great. Needed to manually swap out the PS2 core, though. The one that comes with RetroArch is problematic and dumb. I used to use my regular Xbox One X, not to be confused with the Series X for RetroArch, but not every system can run smoothly. It had problems running Saturn, PS2, and some PSP. The Series S runs those smooth and sexy. Ooh. I'd like some of Ambernick's devices because of the 4:5 screen ratio. Playing old games on 16:9 is a tad too boxed in for me. Those bars on the sides kill the experience a little. The Retroid Pocket Flip got announced recently, and I'm excited for it. It's just going to be a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, but in a clamshell case. Good eating. And I responded, that's awesome. What do you think of the Retroid Pocket 3? He says, of the Retroid Pocket 3, he says, mainly RPGs and platformers. I don't have the patience anymore to sit on the couch and play RPGs. I like playing them on the go where I can put the console into sleep mode and pick it back up when I can. Not a good machine for rhythm games. Can't see the notes very well. I hear that about RPGs, man. The emulation scene has given us the opportunity to utilize save states, so I no longer have to push to the next save checkpoint if I'm going to play something like Final Fantasy VII. You know, it really makes those games much more playable, especially to be able to do it on the go. As far as the Ambernick is concerned, you might appreciate this. This one did not get. Let's see. Hang on one second. So this wasn't like a somebody writing into the show, but our good buddy Alex Swingle asked in our chat the other day. Now that I've had all these bad experiences with Ambernick, what do I still think of the company? Because I used to say Ambernick is the king, and now after my 3 purchases in a row that had problems, now I don't think so. And I thought about it, and what I think is that Ambernick was and is the king of the mid-tier emulation handheld device. The ones that you, Kaiser, are talking about getting, Ambernick is the king, hands down. If you're doing low tier, V90, Powkitty, that's the king. If you're doing mid tier, Ambernick has a lot of options, and they're all awesome. And if you're going high tier, that one's still up for grabs. But it kind of seems like Retroid is what everybody likes right now. So, just food for thought. Those 4x5 aspect ratio machines have excellent build quality. There is, I can't think of the model number offhand. I think it's RG35XX. That it's not a clamshell, but it has the 4x5 aspect ratio. It's more like an OG Game Boy vertical shape, but it's the higher end of the mid tier. That's supposed to be a really popular machine for what you're talking about. Thanks for checking in, man. It's good to hear from you. What we got? Mecha Menace says the first track sounded like it would fit right in a game where you'd hear a Japanese girl yell exuberantly, "On the green!" and "Birdie, try!" 35 minutes in. I'm not sure what kind of RAM your Chinese/Russian repro person is using, but forever might not be forever. There's a lot of talk recently about the NAND failing in the Wii U, and that isn't even that old. I know that replacement battery manufacturers lie about capacity of how many charge cycles are left in those. How cumbersome would it be to maintain hardware? Well, if reliable caps and onboard components meant for older hardware that will be harder to source, and those similar SMD type components are becoming more common, eventually making the older stuff will become niche and less profitable to make. There might even be new environmental protection laws which prohibit certain components from being made. I'm going to stop you right there. I learned a little bit about what basic electrical components being into synthesizers, because you see this a lot in the synthesizer world. You've got 40-year-old electronics. You know, we're talking about electronic keyboards from the 1970s and early 80s, and they have issues, and there are people who, you know, just like everything else, you can watch it on YouTube. You see people popping those things open and breaking them down. And what I don't see a ton of is capacitors just popping and going bad. But when it does happen, they're using off-the-shelf capacitors that you can get now from any parts manufacturer to replace them. I know not all electrical components are like that, but capacitors, specifically like small bore caps that you're talking about, as opposed to huge capacitors that you'd find in like a television or something, those are pretty standard. You can still get capacitors to replace, you know, those types of things from 40 years ago. I'm not saying we won't run into electrical component issues, because I've also seen that in the synth world. A great example is the Roland 303. You can get a clone from Behringer now for $100, but before that was the case, there was something called a Zox box that people used to build. Basically, since the 303s were like 10 grand or whatever, somebody wrote a schematic, and you could get instead of buying a machine, you could just buy the circuit board, you know, something akin to a motherboard, and you would just buy the raw components, and you'd solder them in, and you'd stick that in any given case, like any given, you know, fiberglass project box, and bada boom, bada bing, you got yourself a 303 clone. Well, that's what people did in like the mid 90s, mid to late 90s, or whenever, long time ago. If you look up a Zox box now, a lot of those components are extinct. They were designed, you know, the whole idea was designed to save you money from having to buy an expensive product that, you know, you can recreate yourself. But now that in and of itself has become an expensive project. So I don't know. We might see something similar when it comes to video games, but the way a lot of these things work, they're just like expansion slot readers and a couple of ROM chips, and most of the magic comes in the chips rather than basic components, is the point I'm trying to make. But let's get back to his comment. He says, not with General Electric components, but I've already encountered this when looking for replacement Sega Genesis controller button pads and composite AV cables. People stopped making the button pads. Good composite cables are drying up. Not sure if I agree with that. The button pads, I understand, though. There was some guy on the Atari forum that gifted me 2 sets of old contacts and circuits for my Atari 5200 controllers maybe 10 years ago when they were like $8 to $10 shipped. You search for those on eBay now? Of course, Nintendo stuff is still being made. Yeah. Oh, hang on 1 second here, brother. Mecha Menace, brother, good to hear from you. I hope you're doing well. You know what that sound means. Thank you very much for listening to Tiger Claw Radio. whatever it is you got going on in your life, whatever you're dealing with, just want to urge you to keep getting out of bed in the morning, keep doing what you got to do. I'm rooting for you. I really am. I'll see you next week.